So welcome everybody to today's IEP Live Learn Lunch. It is number 38 in our series of lunchtime webinars, and we're very lucky to be joined today by Ian Cooper, who will be taking us through how to manage high performing teams remotely. We do have some more sessions coming up in the next few weeks, and I will tell you all about those at the end of today's session. But with no further ado, I am going to hand you over to Ian, who is going to take through today's session. So over to you, Ian.
Thanks, Helen. Morning, everybody. Oh, sorry, afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all well and staying safe. I'm just going to share my screen now. Let's hope it's the right screen that it shares. Right, can everybody see my screen, or has that not worked?
Not yet, Ian. Let's just...
Because I'll tell you exactly why, because I haven't pressed the right button.
Easy to do, easy.
Yes. So that should be... Everybody see the screen now?
Not yet, no. Let me make sure. No, we've not had this problem with you before, so let's make sure.
I'm causing problems already, aren't I?
Never.
Yeah, it definitely says I'm screen sharing.
Yes, I'm not seeing it at the moment. That's really bizarre. So we're having a little bit of quirk. Please bear with us.
Let me try again. 2 seconds. Let me try again. Share screen. Share screen.
Let's try doing this for you. Have another go, Ian, and let's see if that works for you now.
There you go. How's that? Are we winning with that one?
Yes, we are. There you go. Nothing that we couldn't fix.
Right, we got there. Apologies. Right. Okay, let me just... I just want to make sure that I can see the chat. I know I had this problem last time in terms of everything. Okay. Right. So hopefully the chat will pop up at some point. So that's fine. Okay. Right. As everybody can see my screen, I'll get going. So this is actually my fourth webinar. I think I'm actually really quite proud of that. So this one is on something that's really close to my heart. It's managing high performing teams remotely. So the first thing I want to do is just to get you guys thinking about really simplifying things. So the first thing I want you to think about, and it will be a theme of this presentation, is 10 slides, and I can foresee it lasting for about 45 minutes. So the first thing is, what is that one thing? Okay. So I really want you to really focus on keeping things as simple as possible. So what I mean by that is simplicity really is functionality. If you want a high functioning team, if you want a high functioning department, and that doesn't have to be remote, it can be on site as well. But just remember, simplicity is functionality. And just adding to that, this is a really good phrase I use and I utilize as much as I can with both myself and my staff is, what's the one thing you could do to make everything else easier or unnecessary? I just want that to sink in. So I'm just going to repeat it again. What's the one thing you can do to make everything easier or unnecessary? And that's something that you really need to hold really at the forefront of your mind when you're managing teams, be it remotely or on site. So what I want to do is just give you, for those of you that haven't had the pleasure / displeasure of my webinars before, I just want to give you guys a little bit of context in terms of my experience. So I wanted to look at really 3 main sectors, because I'm very much a firm believer in how you do one thing is how you do everything. And what you do in your work life really bleeds down into all other aspects and all other facets of your life. So what I want to do is just give you a bit of an idea. Apologies, gone over. I want to give you a bit of idea of my experience. So you can see here, we'll start in the public sector. Previous in the public sector, I spent 4.5 years lecturing. But in terms of remotely, I had 18 months managing staff remotely. Now, they were across the country, but it also meant managing staff who had students abroad as well. So within that, it was predominantly recruitment and curriculum design. From there, I worked as a standards verifier on a part-time basis for Pearson. essentially, for those of you who aren't sure what a standards verifier is, really the generic translation is an EQA. So that was working with colleges across the country in terms of their internal verification processes to making sure they were in a really good place. So for that, I did that for a year and gained a grade 4, which is the equivalent of kind of, it's the highest grade you can get in terms of standards verification. I'm not saying that that's a boast or anything like that. I'm just saying that to give you context in terms of my background. In terms of the private sector, I've had 2 years managing 15 staff approximately. Now that ranged from 13 to 21 at one point. And within that, I was responsible for recruitment, account management, and curriculum design, and growing the Midlands and the North with help of other colleagues from 3 to 36 clubs. From those 2 years of curriculum management, I did last year as head of employability, where I was responsible for staff development, account management, and commercial growth. Previous to having that 1 year of head, I was responsible for helping grow the account from 1 to 13 clubs from 25 to 300 students. So within that, I'm very much a big believer. If you manage your staff well, and if you really buy into your staff, retention and success will look after itself. So process very much in terms of results. So retention, as you can see, over the course of 3 years, went from 52 to 92%. So it wasn't a 1 year jump, because I think that's very much unrealistic. It was the retention when we started with the 1 club was 52. By the time I left, it was 92% with the 13 clubs, and success went from 43% to 90%. So really, if you're looking at increasing clubs, you would expect your retention and success to go down, but actually, due to the quality of the staff that I had with me, that went up, and that helped in supporting get the company I previously worked for the gold standard in investors in people. Personally, I wanted to add this in there. My sport's hockey. I play hockey, and I'm very fortunate enough to captain our side this season. And I still very much see that as managing a team. I have a team of 25 lads and a coach that I have to work with to ensure I get the best out of them. So that's why I've put that in there. I've put that in there to show that remote team management bleeds into everything. It bleeds into relationships, it bleeds into how you work with your team, and it also bleeds into your personal life, because the skills you have and you gain from there with lots of different aspects. Bless you, bless you.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. So the first thing, I think, when you inherit or when you move on with a team, or when you start a job as a manager, you're always thinking, where the hell do I start? And this brings me back to my first comment about simplicity equals functionality. So managing remote teams presents its own unique challenges, especially in this new environment, but generally it has its own unique challenges. But I think it's really important for you to realize, regardless of your role, that the perspective is your own reality. For me personally, there isn't a same reality. Okay. No reality is the same. Everybody has their own perspective on reality. And especially in these tough, challenging times, perspective for me is absolutely everything. So one thing I want you guys to think about is, and please put it on the chat, what are the biggest challenges of managing, of managing a remote team? And again, that doesn't have to be a remote team. If you manage a team on site, this is equally as applicable. So what are the biggest challenges? So if the chat could just light up, because I'm going to stop talking and take a glass of water. Right, let me see if I can get the chat working.
So Pippa has said expectations is the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I've got the chat up and working now. Perfect.
Fantastic.
Excuse me. Anybody else in terms of biggest challenges of managing? Let's remove remote and let's look at a team. Distance and isolation, Louise. Yes. Right. Oh God, I'm going to pronounce this wrong. ASA, is that right? No emotional connection, so hard to build trust and rapport.
Yeah.
Completely agree. Judith, really good point. Keeping connected and ethically meeting collectively. I think they're all really good points. So just to give you guys an idea, feeling forgotten, I think, is really, really important, and time management as well. Dahlia, hi. I know we've chatted before. Keeping insight of the vision. I love that. So I think from looking at that, I think the main thing is feeling valued. And Shirley, really good point about miscomms and lessons I've learned. In order to give you a bit of context, in terms of remote for me, so my region when I was head of employability stretched from Newcastle to Exeter. So a big old region, and me being based in the middle of the country, it was tricky, and I learned a lot. I made a lot of mistakes, and I think it's really important to fail fast forward. But it can be, if I can do it, anybody can do it. 100% trust me on that one. And some really good points there. And I really like the engagement from everybody around this, with especially remote teams. And I think the really good points is the value you can add to your staff without essentially neglecting your staff. And there are a lot, as we can see from those, there are lots of different facets that we need to consider. Okay, second point. Come on, computer. What's the most exciting thing about managing a remote team? So if I could put that to the chat. And I'm very deliberate in everything I do, so hopefully you recognise the point in my background for the slides. Creativity, Pippa, yeah, really good opportunity for people to be creative. Yeah, Mary saying, yeah. Jennifer, I love that. Old tricks don't work. Yeah, you have to be creative with managing remote teams. Brilliant. And for me, look, I've done this for 5 years, and I absolutely. Ace, can you just spell that phonetically? Because I don't want to go through the whole presentation pronouncing your name wrong. I'd feel really rude if I did that. Is that correct, or I'm probably way off?
It's correct, thank you.
Sorry?
It's correct, thank you.
It's correct, brilliant.
Yes.
I'll give myself a little gold star, no problem. Okay, some really good, yeah, Dahlia, I love that one. It's all about evolution. How can you improve your comm skills? And trust. So my best friend is based up in Glasgow, and he works for a company. I'm very deliberate not naming companies, that when they were in COVID, they all work from home, and their figures were the best they've ever been. But in the managing director's infinite wisdom, they decided all staff had to go back to the office for a lack of trust. For me, that's archaic and fundamentally wrong in terms of thinking. So how does trust factor into managing remote teams? Ilda, is that right? Ilid?
Ailey.
Ailey, of course it is. Ailey, sorry.
That's okay.
Ailey, that's a lot easier if I can say that. Yeah, perfect. Ailey, yeah, absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. That's what we're here for. We're here to help. We're here to support. And for me, this is directed at anybody. And what you can get from this, Ailey, is something that you can think, actually, what's the one thing I can get to that to improve my own personal and professional practice? Judith, yeah, I'm gonna go with that one and take that on there. There is no effective team without trust. And that's the first thing. In terms of a remote team, you have to have absolute trust in your staff. Regardless of who they are, you have to have absolute trust in your staff, because without trust, there is absolutely nothing. And the example I used about my best friend having to go back in, by being forced to go back in when Glasgow was quite a high risk for COVID, has completely the opposite effect. And that for me is very archaic thinking, and that's very insecure thinking. And I like to be a little bit controversial, because I can be, and I have very strong beliefs about that. You must have absolute trust in your staff. This is both a positive and a negative. So for me, it's much more of a positive, because if you have absolute trust in your staff, number one, you see your best staff shine straight away. And number two, if the staff aren't ready for the job and aren't good enough, you can find that out quickly, which allows easier, tough decisions to be made. Does that make sense around trust? Yeah, Shirley, absolutely. Yeah, okay. It does bring people together, and that's what we're about. It should be about having essentially a family in your team, and especially remotely, you want to really engage in that team. So really, really good points around that. So Paretos Principle, I love this. Paretos Principle is something that I live by in most of the things I try and do. So for those of you that don't know, essentially says 20% of your effort will give you 80% of your results. And this is a mathematical formula. Pareto is, I think, an Italian mathematician, but it also works the other way. 80% of your customers will give you 20% of your income, or you flip it around, 20% of your customers will give you 80% of your income, 20% of your customers will give you 80% of your complaints. You will wear 20% of your clothes 80% of your time. So you can really use this principle, and I think it's so interesting, to every facet and every aspect of your life. So it works both ways with the 20% and the 80%, but 20% of your effort will give you 80% of your results. Okay. So that's the first thing you need to consider. So you need to consider, what is your 20%? So what is the one thing that you can do? So going back, what's the one thing you can do to make everything else easier and necessary when working with a remote team? So strip everything away. If you're working with a remote team, what's the one thing you can do to give yourself 80% of the results? And I'll put that out to the chat. Helen, you can join in as well. Be available. Okay, we've got one from Donna. Be available. Louise, regular comms. Be realistic. Listen, I like that. Okay, so I'm looking at those. I think they're all active listening. AC is really, really love that. So could you just, for the group, explain what active listening is on the chat? Then show your care as well. Or you can unmute. It's entirely up to you.
I know I find for me, I'm going to go ahead and unmute, Ian, because I can, and everyone else can today, as you've said that you'd like them to be able to. I think for me, it's about having those regular touch points as well, when you're managing remotely. So there's regular contact, so you still very, very much feel like part of a team. Right,
Helen, I'm going to challenge you now. Is that the first thing you would do if you're inheriting a remote team? I
think reaching out the first time and having a conversation, but very much putting that in place. I think I would, because I'd want to be in the habit of making sure we had that regular contact and it became the way we work.
Okay, I'm going to be a deliberate pain because I like doing this. How would you do that?
I think you have your initial conversations need to be straight away.
So therefore, what is the first thing?
Yeah, reaching out and having that first conversation.
Which is what?
Picking up the phone or a Zoom call or...
Okay, so for me, again, and please correct me if I'm wrong, communication has to come first. Is that correct? Would everybody agree with that? Perfect. So I'll give you a really good example. So we had our last hockey training session. Ace, really, really good point about active listening, being in the moment, shutting down and being present. I think the listening is about body language massively, because there is the rule. If people want to write this down, it's 55, 38, 7 in terms of communication. 55% is body language, 38% is tone of voice, and 7% is the actual words you say. So if you strip everything back, you cannot do anything without effective communication. So if your communication is effective, that is your 20%. And that communication varies in a continuum, which I will come to in a bit. But without that communication from your very start, you can't do all those brilliant things that we talked about. So active listening, setting a clear vision. Your communication, first and foremost, needs to be there, because you can have the greatest ideas in the world, but without your communication, you can't move forward and you can't do anything. So your 20% should always be that communication. A real good example for me was last hockey training session on Wednesday. With 6-on-6 game, and our body language as a team was poor. So my instructions or my feedback to the team was our body language needs to be good, because that is our one thing. Once our body language is good, we will start to look up, we will start to move the ball, we will start to be more comfortable. And that really seamlessly goes into being a manager. Your comms need to be strong And miscommunications, as mentioned earlier, if you have strong comms, you get your 80% of those results. So what do those results look like? So something to consider, what do those 80% look like? What's the benefit to you of good communication? So what's the benefit as a manager, or Ailey, someone like you who wants to learn? What's the benefit for you? Because I think self-care is really important. What's the benefit for you as a manager if your time, if your comms are good? Yeah, results and outcomes. Okay. Improve shared goals, clarity. Perfect. Love that. Yeah, Mary. Brilliant. Great level of, yeah, absolutely. Great level of trust and commitment. I also would add in there, in terms of what's your 300, Pip, I love that. You've jumped on one of my future points. 360-degree feedback. The more feedback you get, the better. But it also allows you selfishly to really focus on what you need to do, because especially in remote management, you sometimes get in your own way. Okay. And how will this help your staff? So we've got some really good points in there around clarity, results and outcomes. Yeah, Donna, that's a really, really good point. A great relationship with your team. So any issues are relayed as soon as possible and can be jumped on, because if you do have that trust and commitment, people feel comfortable. One thing you don't want to create is a culture of scarcity and people being scared. Because if people are scared, they tend to squirrel away problems. And what is a little problem becomes a massive one. It's like, you imagine, I suppose the best example of the analogy I could use, or an anecdote, is a spaceship. Spaceship and a plane has to change, has to course correct all the time. So you imagine a plane going to one destination. If you're 1 or 2 degrees off all the time, it's all right in a short journey, but your journey with your team should be a longer journey. If you are continually correcting and you can get those issues sorted quickly, you can always maintain on course. But if people are scared, if we're in an archaic, if we're in an authoritarian culture, people will shut down. And if they shut down, problems get shut down and they just get bigger. So your end goal goes further and further and further away. Okay, so really good points in there. And also, absolute trust makes difficult decisions easier. So what I mean by that is, if you trust your staff and if they are not doing their job, and if you can look at yourself in the mirror and know you're doing all you can, it makes those difficult decisions easier. And please don't think that I'm saying we need to get rid of staff willy-nilly and we need to sack them. Of course not. We need to put support plans in place. But if you have absolute trust, those staff that are underperforming or the job isn't right for them, if they're underperforming, you can get support in really easy. You can get support in really quickly because you've got real clear objective and subjective to some degree data. And then if you put all those things in, if it comes to the difficult decisions, if it comes to performance plans, if it comes to the job not being right for them, you have all the evidence behind you. And ultimately, we don't want someone in a job who isn't right for a job. So it allows you to have those difficult decisions. It makes them a lot easier.
I think we've had an interesting comment, Ian, from Pippa, and I think it's the flip side of the same thing, saying around having that level of trust allows you to have those discussions with your manager, and it really feeds into, we don't want the wrong people in the wrong jobs for their benefit as much as ours as a manager.
Absolutely.
They're in the wrong job, they won't be enjoying it either. So yeah, feeling of trust and confidentiality and being able to have those conversations is so important, even more so remotely, isn't it?
Yes, and for me, I worked at a previous college, and the culture was very much a bullying culture, a scared culture. There was never any why behind what we did. I'm very grateful for that because it gave me a lesson of how never ever to manage people and work with people. And for me, I make an absolute, what's the word I'm looking for? It's one of the first things I do with both staff and students. I make sure I tell my story and I'm very open, I'm very honest on my challenges, because nobody is perfect. Everyone has made mistakes. And if you present the image that you are perfect, you do not have that trust. I've made plenty of errors, plenty of mistakes. I've done lots of stupid things. but it's helped me learn. I've moved forward from that. And that's as kind of tutors, managers, lecturers, assessors, it's as people, it's so important to set the example that failing is absolutely fine as long as you learn from it and as long as you develop from it. I've got 2 Ds and 2 U's at A level because I didn't really get school. I didn't get it. I've got a 3rd class degree because I didn't have the confidence. I had the fixed mindset to think I had to do everything on my own. I will make sure, and some people aren't comfortable with this, but you can get trust in different ways. I will make sure that one of the first things I do to my staff and the students I work with, regardless of whether they were in Bath or whether they were in Leicester or whether they were in Exeter, I make sure that I would tell my story of who I am, because the more they see me, they don't just see me as some idiot in chinos and a check shirt. They see the person rather than the perception. And that for me is so important, that they're the little things that are just as easy to do as not to do. And for me, I would always highlight the mistakes I had made with my staff and the why I'm doing what I'm doing, because it does build that trust. And if your staff trust you, they will go to the ends of the earth with you. Okay, so communication is something that was a really good point earlier on, is that people sometimes feel lonely, they're left out. So how do we ensure staff feel supported regardless of location? So first and foremost, a continuum of communication. So this is the way this continuum works is obviously face-to-face time is limited. So that's at the top, phone and Zoom are in the middle, and emails are in the bottom. So ensure that you have that communication of continuum, that continuum of communication. You utilize Zoom and Teams. So for one-to-one, for CPD, for how-to videos, make sure you've got those on there. Phone, your car is your office, but your car is also your university. I have Audible and I listen to audiobooks when I'm driving. People put the radio on. I hardly ever listen to the radio unless it's on Saturday. Maybe I'm listening to some sport. But your car is your office. So when you're on long journeys, make sure you phone your staff. Even if it is just to say hello, those things mean the most. Little things really mean the most. Okay, utilize it as your university, because I've learned so much from just having Audible on. I'll go through a book probably in a week, and that improves me as a person, which allows me to serve my staff better. Okay, so don't look at it as dead time. Look at your car as your university and your office, obviously all done safely and with hands-free. And it's things like that where your staff will really link into that and really buy into that, because they can see what you're doing, and they can also see how hard you're working for them. Online platforms, shared drive, SharePoint, making sure that you're continually reinforcing that. So instead of spending all your time telling people what to do, refer them back to the information that is on SharePoint. So it comes back to simplicity is functionality. So building that platform. So right, if you need something on marking, you can find it here. If you need something on assessing, you can find it here. If you need something on English and maths, you can find it here. If you need something in terms of specification, it can be found here. In terms of creating a good notice board for your environment, it can be found here. In terms of prevent, safeguarding, E&D, documentations can be found there. So it's all built up. So instead of chasing, you've got those hyperlinks. So you're saving your time and also allowing staff to feel empowered to go and do their own thing. One-page documents. I get bored very, very easy, and my attention span is quite low. So making sure it's one page, because if personally I see something filled up with text, it goes back to that miscommunication. One-page documents with bullet points, so effectively staff can print it out, they know what they need to do, it's a clear tick list, and they feel a sense of accomplishment. And also on there, it's referral points. Okay, so that goes back to what I was saying about hyperlinks. Where can they refer to rather than you chasing around? Perfect, Pippa, like that. Yeah, really good point about the funding rules. You can also refer direct to the government. It makes things a hell of a lot easier. Agenda, just keeping things nice and simple. But I'll go on to what that looks like later on. And face-to-face, I love this. I love a cup of tea. And for me, some of the best times I've spent with my staff members was when I just said, right, let's have half an hour. Let's just chat. Don't care what it's about. Let's just chat. So really good point there, just on that. So referral points, avoid copying info into an email and use the real-time link. So especially with things like funding rules and government guidance, especially around COVID. You've got real-time evidence there, so you don't get yourself caught out. And also staff can also see the why and really understand why they're doing what they're doing. But going back to what I was saying about face-to-face, cup of tea time is just sitting down having a cup of tea, because the staff feel comfortable. They don't feel pressured. They feel relaxed. And if they're relaxed, they're more likely to be honest and trustworthy with you. Cup of tea takes half an hour, but it's just as easy to do as not to do. For me, I put cup of tea time ahead of pretty much everything, because we get focused too much on quantitative too much, when actually it's about how people are. Generally, across the country, the level of tutors and assessors will be pretty much the same in terms of qualification experience. What separates the outstanding organisations from the not so outstanding organisations is culture. So previous place of work I was at when was grade 1, then went from grade 1 to grade 3, and then 2 grade 4s. It's a beautiful place to work, and there is only one reason why they are, in my opinion, and that was down to culture. Because if your culture is not correct, staff will not work for you. They really will not work for you, and they will do the opposite. Not intentionally, but if you batter people down, if you make them lose their confidence, okay, if they come to work with fear of dread and fear of upset, there is only one way that is going to go. We are out of this archaic authoritarian management system. And for me, good managers are the ones that serve their staff, not ones that rain down on their staff. So deconditioning your thinking around the benefits of face-to-face. It doesn't have to be getting a piece of paper done. It doesn't have to be filling in a report. And you can tell I get quite passionate about this because it's so true. Spend time individually with your staff and you will get so much more from them, because little things really do mean the most. For me, hockey was a year 10 at school. I can still remember this. This was one sentence from my PE teacher, Mr. Maybury, and that was a while ago. He said that I was good at hockey. That was one comment, year 10 GCSE PE. And 20 years later, I still remember that. And that just really highlights for me the importance of little things. Okay. Staff development. So one thing for you guys to think about is how can you effectively utilize your existing team? And the first thing I've got there is internal promotion. So what are people's thoughts on if I say, right, you've got a team, make some internal promotions? What are people's thoughts on that? Or what feedback might you get? So if you were to say to your MD or your boss or whoever, can I look at making some internal promotions? Let's rephrase it. What would the answer be?
So we've got a comment here from Pippa saying, right job, wrong person. Just because of time served, it doesn't make them the best person for the job. Look at skills.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And that's something in terms of staff development. There's something that's really important. And also, go on.
Yep, no, carry on.
And also it's attitude as well. I've employed people before who didn't have a teaching degree, didn't have teaching experience, but their attitude was right for the job.
Yes, Louise has shared that money is often an issue to being able to promote people, and we've all been there, haven't we? Donna's got an interesting comment here as well, saying there may not be the internal structure to promote internally. Could you not encourage champions within the team instead?
Perfect. Yeah, and yeah, agreed. Martin, you've got has to be non-financial reward. Yeah, and one of the things that was mentioned at the start, a really good thing about remote teams is that you can be creative. And I like that, Ethelene, positive outlook of the staff and knowing that they can progress within. For me, you can be creative within that. And it goes back to Pippa's point as well about the skill set. It's recognizing that you want to develop your staff. So It doesn't have to be financial. It really doesn't. Not everything is about money. You want to be paid what you're worth, but also a title can take you on to the next step within your career. So for me, let's take the money out of it. Let's look at solutions. It's a change of name. Champions is a really good one from Donna. It could be regional leads. It's just a change of title. You may not be able to afford it in terms of monetary, but if you can change someone's title, you can change someone's confidence, because it shows that you have faith in them. It's being really honest. I'm always really honest about money. I will do the best to pay people what they deserve. If I can't get it, I will have done all I can. And it got to the point where I had 3 very good staff, and I even offered from my pay to take a reasonable pay cut to give them extra money so they could be promoted. But if money is really something that your company is struggling with, I know finance directors are never a big fan of paying people more money, changing the title and giving them extra responsibility. If you are in the right culture and if you are honest, staff will work with that. They really will.
We have an interesting point from Louise around training and CPD not being in place, and that's always an option, isn't it, when money's tight? Look for CPD opportunities for people, and it ties in with Pippa's comments around using projects to give additional responsibility and test the waters.
I think Pippa's probably read my presentation somehow, because she keeps preempting what I've said. So this, again, I'll just use my examples. Internal promotion. So what I promoted 3 people to regional leads. So their title were changed, and a little bit more money if I could. But it was only a very small amount of money. But again, it shows that you're working for your staff. You could also create new roles, which we've mentioned, which is great. Developing the existing skill set. So if someone is a good tutor and move forward, developing their skill set to give them a small team to work with. Delivering CPD is really important. So for me, when I had my role of looking after 14 sites, account management, staff management, and commercial development, I had to get out my own way in terms of delivering CPD. So it's having that trust in your staff, your leads, your champions to deliver that CPD. It's great for them because they see that trust, and it's great for the other staff because those staff that are maybe on site or delivering are going to be much better placed than you are as a manager to deliver that CPD in some aspects. Getting out your own way is really important. Leaving your ego at the door and knowing that your staff can probably, this is especially true for me, knowing that your staff can deliver better CPD than you can. DMD is one that I try and work at all the time. Delegate first, manage second, do last. Okay, so DMD, that's a really, really, really keen thing, because it's easy to do it all yourself. I must do it, but your staff will never learn if you do everything for them, and also you will end up blowing up in terms of stress. So culture. Structure creates a foundation for an outstanding culture to appear and flourish. Going back to my point from the previous slide, colleges, training providers around the country will all have pretty much the same level of staff. Okay, the difference maker is culture, without a doubt. A colleague of mine is now a principal, previous colleague of mine is now a principal at a college up north. She is doing an absolutely fantastic job, and she's always smiling. She was always praising her staff. She's very, very active on LinkedIn. And that is to do with the culture that she has created. That's why that college is outstanding, because she's excellent at what she does, and she's excellent about creating that culture. Okay. Without a culture, be it in professional sports teams, be it in businesses, wherever, be it in mechanics, without a culture, you cannot have an outstanding team. So lead by example, just as easy to do as not to do. So it's just as easy if you're having to travel 200 miles, say, oh no, we'll just do it over Zoom. It's just as easy to do that, but it's also just as easy to get in the car and drive. It's just as easy to sit down and have a cup of tea with someone for half an hour. But if you perceive it as a waste of time, just as easy not to do. Okay, it's just as easy to do a video that lasts 5 minutes, but it's just as easy not to do. And the difference is the successful people are the things that do the little things, little and often, the things that are just as easy to do. A lot of people talk to me about running. And my example, I've used this previously. People want to run, go and run 3 times a week for 5 minutes, because it's not about the time you run, it's about creating that habit. If you do that, you will create a good habit. Okay. I have a cold shower for 2 minutes every morning. I've created a good habit. It's only 2 minutes out of my day, just as easy to do as not to do. So lead by example. Never let your staff, so when you talk to your staff, always they should be able to see, actually, you know what, Ian would do that. Okay, if you give an instruction, it should never be, oh, Ian wouldn't do that. It should be something that you as a manager, you know that they would do or you would do for them. Ordinary effort done consistently equals extraordinary results. Something we get caught upon, especially in today's society with Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Everybody wants something straight away, but actually realize, especially with the law of compounding, ordinary effort done consistently equals extraordinary results. You really do get a compounding effect. You as managers and tutors and assessors, you should be continually refining and evolving your process. I listen to Audible. I read a lot, I journal. If I'm not developing my own performance, how can I ever fully effectively develop my staff? And it's a real good question that you should ask yourself. If you are not reading, if you are not listening to Audible, and it doesn't need to be 2-3 hours a day, it's just doing it continually. There's 15-20 minutes, writing a page in a journal. If you're not reflecting on your own performance, you can't effectively serve your staff. And we're all learners. So show you really care. There's been mentioned quite a lot, but show you really care. Get to know your staff. Get to know them, ask how their daughters are, ask how their sons are, ask how they are, how they're getting on. Because little things like that, again, they mean the most, especially in today's climate. Make sure you do the little things, and that comes over the cup of tea time. Get to know your staff, because that's a 20%, that's your Paretos Principle. 20% of your effort will give you 80% of your results from your staff, and you will end up getting more for less. Okay, but also create a structure that offers support and ultimately accountability. If you can look at yourself in the mirror and know you've done everything you can, the difficult conversations become a lot easier. Honesty, transparency, and always the why. Why do you do what you do? Why is it going to benefit the staff to do this? Okay, it will save them time in the long run, because it's always that why. If people have a why, they have something to buy into. And again, I've mentioned this a few times, but something like a thank you, just picking the phone up to a staff member, sending them a WhatsApp. So let's say, for example, a staff member's delivered CPD, they've done a great job. Really appreciate the job you've done. Fantastic. I'll get you lunch next time. All right. Something like that. I remember my year 10 PE teacher's comment from GCSE PE, and that was a throwaway 5-second comment. So little things. Sometimes a thank you means the world. Okay, so if I just go previous, has anybody got any comments on that?
We've not had any questions at the moment. I've had a come in from Shirley saying staff to be comfortable and confident to be themselves. Everyone feels valued, and therefore everyone adds value. Love that.
Love that. We are all simultaneously always the teacher and the student, whatever we do. I think that's really important. I think value is key, because if you don't feel valued, you're just going to disengage regardless of your qualifications, regardless of your experience. And I've seen that happen a lot of times. And also on that, happiness shared. So really good quote I had the other day, happiness shared is happiness doubled. Sadness shared is sadness halved. So there's a really good one in terms of that as well. So I'll repeat that again. Happiness shared is happiness doubled. And problem shared is problem half, or sadness shared is sadness halved. Really, really pertinent and really important little things it is. So what is it? I've talked a lot. I really have talked a lot. I did think this was only going to be half an hour. But what does that look like? So I've just tried to create an example of things that I've done. So priority emails 2 to 3 times a week, concise and objective. Utilize hyperlinks. Now, there was a really good comment with regards to using live hyperlinks, government websites, especially for funding rules, to ensure that everything's on there and everything's where it needs to be, but also utilizing hyperlinks to your shared platforms. Calendar requests. Selfishly, I do calendar requests to remind myself, but also to remind the staff and putting the agenda on. That way you lose excuses and you have support. There is no excuses to miss things. Staff CPD, once a month, same time. Vary that location. There might be a little bit more travel, but it's fair. Leadership CPD. So this is one of the things I let my lead tutors deliver the staff CPD, and then I spent time with the lead tutors. That increased support for the staff. It increased honesty and transparency, because they could just chat with each other. And then the leadership team, they got some real good one-to-one time with me in terms of development. Online platforms. So keep it simple. If you're using objective, use spreadsheets that are objective, but also do little things like pre-include the formulas. The less work staff have to do, the easier things are for you. So you're putting the foundation in to allow them to flourish. It then allows really simple, effective data to be presented and used. And also staff know their success, they know their attention, they know exactly what they're working for. Might sound simple, but again, it's one of those things that is just as easy to do, but not to do. Process and procedures. I talked about it earlier, 1 page maximum. That's all it needs to be, 1 page maximum bullet points, because we talked about miscommunication. What you want to do, you want to limit that as much as you possibly can. So you want to limit those process and procedures to 1 page. And also to put that in there, ensure maybe where possible, it's linked to a video that you've done for your staff. So you're working on learning styles, and you're working on a visual learning style, and you're working on a written learning style. You're also, I suppose, working a little bit kinesthetically as well. And travel for your staff. It's so easy. So easy to say, no, we'll just do it over Zoom. It is so easy, but it's not about doing what's easy. It's about doing what's right. And for me, I had a staff member who was an outstanding staff member that worked in Exeter. Now, Exeter from me is 233 miles. He, over the course of a year, was visited once previous to coming across with myself. I made sure that from September 2019 to March 2020 that staff member was seen 6 times. And the engagement, the student numbers, the lesson observation, he was observed on a quality monitoring visit by Prime, said it was the best lesson they've ever seen. Okay, student numbers went up, that staff member's engagement, that staff member's communication went up. It was brilliant to watch, and that was down to one thing only: traveling down to Exeter, getting that person to travel down for me. It's easy to avoid your long trips, but they're the most important, and the staff recognise that. 450-mile round trip makes no odds to me as a person, because I know what I've got from that for that staff member is utterly priceless in the long run. And also, final bit, individual reviews, clear criteria, really important. Follow them up. Make sure they're objective, but they're also subjective. Look at your figures, but also ask them how they are, what can be improved. So it's really getting that mix, so staff feel valued and they also understand why we do what we do. Because if they understand that, they're a lot more likely to buy in. So in conclusion, first and foremost, be selfish. I like to be controversial. Be selfish. And I've said this before on LinkedIn. I got told off for this once previously, but I stick by it. My staff are the most important thing, not the students, because if I look after my staff, I know they will provide the students with an outstanding experience. So if you don't focus on being the best version of you, you cannot effectively serve your staff. Look after yourself first and foremost. Sorry, Pip, I'm just picking up. Process and procedures. Yeah. Perfect. Love that. And I think one of the things for me is I used to go a lot on processes and procedures, and the staff member said, I don't get it. And that's because it was very much a visual learner. So yeah, really good point in there.
It's important then, isn't it, to ask that question? And I think you mentioned this a few minutes ago, didn't you, around visual, auditory and kinesthetic. Yeah. By asking people how they want to access information, you'll be able to make sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep it as varied as possible. How-to videos are good. They improve yourself in terms of comms, and they add that extra layer of support. And remember, we're all learners and we all learn in different ways. So it's having fun. It's having that variety. It's doing videos. It's doing procedures that are written. It's doing face-to-face. It's spending time with people individually. Make sure it's as varied, and it should be fun. Life's about enjoying that. There's no reason why your job shouldn't be fun. Really important thing to remember: if things go wrong, take full responsibility. When things go well, praise is always for the staff, because they do what they do.
So we've got a comment here from Shirley saying that employees that feel included are positively engaged within their company and the best version of yourself. She completely agrees with.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The one thing my staff probably don't like is the amount of tea. The amount of tea I drink, to be fair, and the fact I always ask them for tea and biscuits.
Oh no, there's never too many. No, never too many cups of tea in a work day. I'm on your side with that one, or biscuits. Pippa said people working from home, this is a good point, can't always print things off and it can be hard to read lengthy text on a screen. So thinking about how we communicate and what we're asking people to do.
Yeah. No, agreed. And I think on that, Pippa, as well, I mean, Shirley, first and foremost, I completely agree. Get your staff engaged, because if they are engaged with you, they will engage with the company. Pippa, can't print off, hard to read in a lengthy screen. Yeah, I'm all about solutions. What I would then say in terms of staff, completely agree. What you can do there, you've got the option of condensing it, and you can always condense things, ensuring staff have a double screen. And so I operate with a double screen and a wireless mouse. It might sound silly, but it saves me so much time. Compounding, that saves you so much time. And because you compound and because you're doing things simply, you're more engaged and you get more done quicker. Hey, if we ever want to, how to draw boundaries. Yeah, no, I agree with that. In terms of boundaries, I think that for me is I think that's a call that you would make with your staff. And if a staff member is getting too friendly, it's important to address that straight away, because you should have that honesty and transparency. And it's knowing which staff you can have fun with and have a laugh with. And it's essentially what I'm trying to say is how well you know your staff in terms of how you set those boundaries.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point that Ace has raised there around setting those boundaries and the contracting that takes place between a manager and a member of staff. And she's put here about some employees may think and feel that they want to become friends. And there is that level of responsibility. And going back to what you were talking about earlier, if those boundaries aren't set, you go back to having those difficult decisions, difficult to make again. So I think this is a really key point from the point of view of people stepping up into management.
Yeah, and on that, I think it's really important that staff know that they can come and talk to you, but they also know where the line is. So hockey is probably the best example for me, recent example, that I'm quite relaxed, I'm quite laid back, but also people know that when you're in work mode, you're in work mode. And when I'm serious, people listen. And that it comes down to respect and clarity of boundaries. And friends, look, friends isn't necessarily a bad thing at all, as long as people are aware of those clear boundaries. A third point, we talked about feedback, always be curious. Feedback, ignore my poor English. Feedback comes from everybody, from students, from employers, from staff, from commercial partners. It should always come from everybody. The worst managers are the ones that refuse, in my opinion, to accept feedback or don't ask for feedback, because we are always learning, we always make mistakes. We need to ensure that we're constantly feeding back and constantly asking for feedback. What can I do better? But still making sure it's realistic and relevant. And be open and honest. Share your story if it creates a connection. Okay. Last bit. None of this is revolutionary. Everyone does it. But what separates the average from the outstanding is the consistency of what you do. So what I mean by that, everyone's gone for a run once in a while. And what separates the people that do running is that they do it consistently. They don't do it 7 days a week. They do it 3 or 4 days a week. That's it. Doing the simple things. What helps people become a lifelong learner or curious is that the fact that they maybe read half an hour a day, or they listen to Audible. They don't do it all the time. They do it little and often. So being extraordinary and working in high performance teams, if you want your staff to be high performing, and I'm a firm believer in everybody has the capacity and the potential to do that. Everyone has the capacity to be outstanding. Everybody has the capacity to be an outstanding manager and share that to their staff and create an outstanding team. But that starts with really realizing that communication is your key thing, and you need to do the simple consistently.
We've had a lovely message from Ace, who shared her LinkedIn details. So guys, if you do want to connect, please do feel free to use the chat to share your details. I think that's a lovely idea. If you want to do that. And Pippa said a phrase that drives her mad is, you don't need to worry about that. It doesn't concern you. Yes, I can empathise with that. That drives me mad also.
It does, and it's quite condescending as well, in my opinion.
Very much, yeah.
For me, I will always explain things. and for me, I think I'd never do stuff like that. So, for example, stuff like in my previous role, we talked about finances quite a lot. That's easy for me. Well, finances don't concern you. But actually, people need to have an understanding of how finances work. So it actually does. And that's down to perspective. And that's, for me, I don't know the context, but for me, that's quite an arrogant comment.
Excellent.
And that... I honestly, apologies to everybody.
Perfect timing. Don't apologise. In the perfect timing, we have 2 minutes to go, which gives me just enough time to thank you very much for another engaging webinar and sharing your story with us as you always do. So really, really grateful for that. And the comments are all agreeing with me that it's been a really useful and helpful presentation. Lots of thank yous. And that people are going to take things back to their team. So thank you for that. I'm not going to read them all out, but thank you guys.
No worries. No worries.
We will see you again in future webinars, Ian, and I'm going to encourage you to attend some as well as run some. Contributions are always welcome. So really, really pleased with that. Thank you all for your time today. I am going to just give you a couple of details of the webinars we've got coming up. As I mentioned earlier, this is our 38th that Ian has delivered for us today. Next week, we have Career Mums joining us, where they're going to deliver a presentation around how we support lone parents and people who are returning to work. In particular, lone parents. So that should be a good one. And then in 2 weeks' time, on the 25th of November, we've got a really interesting webinar coming up where Nesta's going to be joining us and sharing some research that's been done around mapping career pathways. And this work has been done in line with the vulnerable at-risk jobs in the current coronavirus in the work environment, and how we can support, how we can use this research to help support our service users and our participants consider new jobs that are less at risk and they're more likely to find work in those fields. So an interesting one. Please do join us. Thank you again for your time. It's been great. Enjoy the rest of your work week. I hope to see you all. It's the members live lunch. So it's the members informal chat session this Friday lunchtime at 12 o'clock. So if you'd like to come along, unmute yourselves and have a chat with people about things that are important to you within employability and life in general. And please do come and join us on Friday, and we would love to see you there. Take care, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.